You've just entered the No Delusion Zone. I'm David Dubato. Today, my very special guest is Jessica Denson. Jessica is known for her pioneering legal work in validating Trump's infamous and very illegal DNA in court. In the Lights On podcast, Jessica shares insights into her unique experience as a woman who escaped the mesmerism of right wing propaganda and stepped out onto her own to challenge the lawlessness of Donald Trump. She's made it her mission to expose the lies she once believed and demanded accountability for would be dictators in America. With a combination of urgency and joy, Jessica shines a light on the real attacks on freedom we face, the hijacking of the Christianity platform, battles for justice and transparency worldwide, and most importantly, the power we each have when we stand in the light. Lights On, her very popular podcast on YouTube, brings a vivid and empowering perspective that you won't find anywhere else, except here, right now. So I welcome to the No Delusion Zone. Jessica, welcome.
Thanks so much. Wonderful to be with you, David.
Well, same here. And as I said off air, we are a kindred spirit. I've seen a lot of your work, what you've written, what you've spoken about, and we share the same opinion. It's just exasperating. It's sometimes difficult to put it into words, but we're going to try. Very briefly, and I know we're kind of pressed for time here. I did mention your victory in court, which took, I think, about 2 or 3 years altogether, if not more. Could you just briefly go over the whole DNA, the victory you had in court, the NDA, excuse me, the victory you had over Trump, and what that means, really?
Yeah, I mean, you said we invalidated his DNA. I don't know. Maybe we should
I
work on
wish,
that next.
yeah, I'm just projecting like he does all the time.
But absolutely, yeah, it was many years of my life. Actually not over yet because the underlying case that prompted it all, which was a human rights and discrimination case, is still going on in the New York Supreme Court, which is their state court there in New York. But basically, I worked for the Trump campaign in 2016, being just completely brainwashed by Fox News, thinking that up was down, thinking our freedom was on the line and was going to be taken away if Hillary Clinton became the president. So I worked for them, had a horrific experience that is, to any one of probably your viewers or my current viewers, very predictable, knowing what we know about the Trump sphere. They basically sabotage people that have the best intentions. So maybe there were some decent people like me working there in 2016, but we were the ones that got destroyed the quickest. And I experienced that, walked away under a very dark cloud where I thought I wanted more than anything just to brush it off, never think about it again, move forward with my life. And I kind of had this existential crisis where I realized I couldn't do that. I could not move forward without confronting what happened to me there. I would have no credibility if I didn't take a stand for the injustice that I experienced on that presidential campaign. And so that prompted what was initially a pro se lawsuit in 2017. And the first thing they did out of the gate was retaliate with an illegal non-disclosure agreement, $1.5 million arbitration demand against me for having broken their illegal NDA by filing a human rights lawsuit. So that was the beginning of it. It ended up being a multi-year, multi-forum battle. In the end, David, I invalidated every single non-disclosure signed by a Trump staffer in 2016. Hundreds, if not more than 1,000. The number they gave was in the hundreds. I tend to think there were more like over 1,000 of those NDAs signed in 2016 by volunteers, staffers. Every single person that touched that campaign was demanded to be silenced for life for anything relating to Donald Trump. I mean, this is a man that to this day is fooling his supporters into thinking he's a free speech champion. And he literally silenced everybody that worked for him or attempted to until I came along for the rest of their lives relating to anything remotely attached to him, as remote as a perfume owned by Ivanka Trump. I mean, that's how ridiculous this NDA was. So in the end, which was about, my goodness, I think we're a little over a year ago now, we finalized the class action and that freed every single person from that illegal NDA.
Am I correct in saying then that you're not any longer invited to Christmas at Mar-a-Lago or Trump Tower?
I was never invited. I was like, that was the whole thing. Like, I think my conscience to them on that campaign, granted, I was brainwashed and on the wrong side of the political spectrum. I was on their side in that sense, but I've always been the same person. I've always cared very much about ethics and hated corruption. My feelings were just misplaced, but I think they sensed that about me in that 2016 campaign. And that's why I had a target on my back so early because I was clean. I wasn't the kind of person that sees the kind of things that go on in that environment and is okay with them.
Like I said, there's just so much to unpack here. Let me jump into one of the more recent events that I'm still not over. I'm sure you're not either. Give us your thoughts about that disgraceful performance last Friday in the Oval Office. What did you think when you saw it? What are you thinking now?
Well, like first thing I posted on Blue Sky after I saw it was go Zelensky. Like we're with you. That man does not represent us. We can talk about this more today. He's an illegal president, doesn't have the constitutional right to be in the office that he holds. He does not represent the United States or the free world. So let's just be clear about that. I've seen a lot of different framing. Obviously, it was sickening the way he was treated, but it was so obvious to be small man bullying behavior from Donald Trump and JD Vance. I mean, just the tiniest little nobodies trying to bully who is one of the strongest, most moral, fearless leaders that this world has right now. Volodymyr Zelensky. And that doesn't mean he's flawless. That doesn't mean he's perfect. Doesn't mean he has, things that we couldn't criticize. But for his role in history, standing up to the aggression of Vladimir Putin and how strong he has been. I mean, he could have escaped Kyiv on day 2 of that war. And he has stood strong. He has stood strong with his country. And so he, despite their difference in stature, was by all means the biggest man in that room. And I frankly, David, people said, oh, it's just such a tragedy for peace. He walked away without a deal. I didn't want to see a deal that would have made him or the Ukrainian people concede anything or turn over their mineral rights to the United States. I mean, we have no right to anything Ukrainian. Like they have been fighting for our freedom, like he very clearly said in that Oval Office spectacle to those two ignoramus puppets of the Kremlin. This is going to come to your shore. He's been what the Ukrainian people have been fighting for the entire free world. So we're not doing them any favors by supporting them. I would have been for even more support than the Biden administration gave out of the gate.
Well, let me just jump in here if I could.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm echoing everything you're saying.
yeah,
In fact, when Zelensky refused and walked out of the Oval Office without signing an agreement, I had more respect for him.
exactly,
I mean,
exactly,
my God, if he would have signed it, that would have been a tragedy. But
exactly.
no,
Yes, yes,
he told him to take that and shove it, basically. And I'm proud.
yes,
And as you know, his popularity soared in Ukraine after he went
yes.
back. It was the exact opposite of what Trump thought. Well, Trump's a moron. He doesn't think anyway. I'm sorry. And so, no, I had to bring that in because that's probably one of the most enraging moments that
Yeah,
Trump has made with
yeah,
me, and he's had several.
yeah.
But this one is just unbelievable. Uh, uh, let me move on here to some other. We have to go on to. I have to say, right out of the gate, after talking about the Oval Office, Trump is not my president. He's not my president. He will never be the president. He's illegal. You've said in several of your recent podcasts that, and this actually comes from the military, from the UCMJ. You do not, in fact, you have a right in the military to disobey an illegal order. It's not an option. Well,
Right.
Americans have that right too. In fact, they should. If there's an unconstitutional, which is an illegal order given by anyone, including the president, don't obey it. It's illegal. You don't have
Yes.
to. So why don't you talked about that? Why don't you expand on the fact that he ain't our president, and that the fact that he's basically an illegitimate buffoon sitting there, and that his orders pretty much are illegal and don't have to be followed.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's a squatter in that house without any constitutional authority. I spent the a good month before January 6th, reporting on this singular issue of Trump's disqualification with constitutional scholars, because there was a lot of misinformation out there about the scope of Trump v. Anderson. Of course, that ruling where SCOTUS said, no, Colorado, you can't keep Trump off your ballot. Now, that was wrong in itself, but even taking the import of that screwed up judicial train wreck of a ruling, to quote the preeminent scholars on Section 3, Bowden Paulson, even with that judicial train wreck of a ruling, it did not remove Trump's disqualification. It didn't touch his status as an adjudicated insurrectionist, which was adjudicated both in the Colorado courts up through their Supreme Court and in Maine and Illinois.
This You're talking about the 14th Amendment, Section
14th Amendment,
yeah,
Section
right. Just for
3.
folks that don't know, yeah.
Yes, this is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that makes clear, okay, this is post-Civil War, we got to make sure we don't have insurrectionist people who are against our union serving in office. And they put in Section 3 to bar insurrectionists from holding office. Now, there is a mechanism to remove that disqualification. It's not a punishment, doesn't send anybody to jail. By the way, there doesn't have to be a criminal trial or a charge of insurrection for this to be established. But they put in a mechanism to remove it, and that's a 2/3 vote of Congress. To remove it. Okay, there's so much misunderstanding out there about this. So I spent, like I said, the month before January 6th speaking to constitutional scholars about this very issue, platforming the scholarship of Bowden Paulson, which makes crystal clear there's nothing in that ruling keeping Congress from rejecting his electors on January 6th, which is what they could have and should have done. David, that was their constitutional duty. Every single one of them across the aisle failed us on January 6th by not objecting to Trump's electors. They should have done it. They needed to do it as per the Constitution. And because they did not, and because John Roberts illegally swore this man in, when he couldn't even put his hand on a Bible. I think he might be a little superstitious and might have thought it was going to blow up on him or something. But
well, I mean, that was one of the many times that the Congress has let us down before, and of course, many times since then.
Yeah.
You talked recently, and I've talked a lot about the fact that the Democrats have let us down. I'm as angry at the Democrats. Well, I won't say that. No, nothing compares to what the Republicans are doing. But I'm almost as angry at the Democrats as I am at the Republicans, because they are spineless. I'm sorry. They're cowards. They're very rich cowards. And they have let us down. They've allowed us to become an oligarchy on our way to Gilead. What are your thoughts on the Democrats right now?
Furious. And this is why I'm more furious almost with them. And like you, it's hard to be more furious with them than the complete zombie apocalypse that is the Republican Party. But these people purport to be pro-democracy. They purport to be on our side. They go out to this day and they give great speeches. They're
Constitution.
Really... Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. They've discovered the Constitution after January 6th. It's amazing. But this is one thing that really gets to me. And I knew through some back channels, the messaging the excuses they were putting out there for not objecting to Trump's electors on January 6th. And without releasing, stuff that's been shared with me off the record, it boils down to they were afraid for their own personal safety. That's what they say. Now, first of all, I don't even that's a really kind of pathetic excuse to me, because just look at all of the violence we were promised when Trump went through his court cases, all of the, war that we were going to see spring up. That never happened. That never happened. There were a few people popping up here and there outside of the courthouses in New York. And so, first of all, I don't think there would have been violence if they did do their job. And second of all, if you're acting from the predicate of the threat of violence keeping you from upholding your oath, you have abandoned the republic in that moment.
Well, it's the same reason that Biden refused to back Ukraine, because of the threat of nuclear war. Congress is using the same thing. Oh, you're going to threaten me? Okay, then what do you want? I'll do anything you want.
Yeah, but here's the thing, David. Every one of those Congress members has a hell of a lot more security than the average American.
No kidding.
No kidding, right? You entered public service. You went into this space where you decided to expose yourself for all of the the perks that come with that job, you decided to put yourself in this space to be a public servant and assume those risks. And so to lay down when we needed you most out of this supposed threat of violence, when we're likely headed for violence anyway, and I say that absolutely not endorsing it, but I think it's coming. I mean, it very well may be inevitable with what is going on right now. And so I think that was cowardice at its peak. And as a caucus, they clearly decided as a caucus to do this and not to have a single one of them raise a peep on January 6th in the name, David, in the name of a peaceful transfer of power. They did this. They confirmed the votes of a man who violated the peaceful transfer of power and for that reason is disqualified from office in the name of a peaceful transfer.
And some of them were cowering under their desks on January 6th,
I know.
2021. And they voted to allow this animal to occupy the White House. It's just staggering. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken, made podcasts, or written about the utter cowardice in general throughout our government on both sides that have led us to this spot. I guess I was naive. I didn't realize the depth of narcissism and just out and out cowardice within all of our elected officials.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we were kind of in our group, and we'll talk about this more in a few minutes. I think what we're doing on March 14th. But we had an entire protest. Like what happened as a result of my reporting was my audience came back to me and they said, Jessica, we feel like we need to show up in person. Like there has to be a physical presence. Otherwise, there's no other way to get our message through to them. And I had never done anything like this in my life, but I decided with the encouragement of my audience, these amazing, engaged, viewers that I have, and I'm sure you have the same kind. I'm like, we're going to do this. We need to organize a protest in DC. And we literally, with a week and a half's time, put together a protest, spanned 3 days, had 7 speakers, raised a lot of money. It was really beautiful, the support we saw from, frankly, around the world. And we were in the halls of Congress. I mean, I talked to Adam Schiff. I went into many of the offices of many of the names on the Democratic side, and they knew we were there. I was in Chris Murphy's office, and his one of, I guess, the receptionist or the staffer at the desk there said there's this girl running around Congress organizing this protest, and the friend that was with me, my co-organizer, was like, it's her. This is the one. So
let's go into the next one then, because we're a little bit behind. You've got another one, maybe bigger, hopefully bigger, coming up on the 14th. Let's talk about that. What's going on March 14th?
Listen, my friend, we need to change the course of history on March 14th. I don't know how to say it more clearly and more emphatically. We cannot stand for 4 years of this. Like democracy is literally going up in smoke before.
We don't have 2 years to the midterms. You know that.
No, we don't. We're delusional if we think we can get that far.
And this is the No Delusion Zone. So
there you go.
Not allowed.
There you go. So we're not going to be delusional.
No, we're not going to go there. No.
So we basically took that energy that we had on 314 and this beautiful movement that we started, and we realized as this illegal presidency took shape and just is going through the daily horrors, and what are we, a month into this, just over a month, that we had to do this again. And we had to be very clear about our messaging being that we need immediate action here. The narrative has to change about the acceptability of Donald Trump in the White House. We needed to be calling for his immediate impeachment and removal, or immediate enactment of Section 3 of the court right now. And so giving ourselves enough time to plan and taking the date, it's very significant in meaning because it's 314, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It is also Pi Day. It is also the day before the Ides of March. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of symbolism here, but this is the point, my friend. There have been beautiful protests all across the country. This has got to be in their backyard, in their faces. This is DC only on March 14th, and I do believe we are going to have the masses with us on that day. So we are summoning everyone, whatever your cause is. Yes, this is 14th Amendment centered and born, but whatever your cause is, if you're afraid of losing your Social Security, if you're a veteran, if you stand with Ukraine and the free world, if you don't want to see democracy die on our watch, we need you in DC on March 14th.
Well,
Our website's nowmarch.org. Yeah.
I agree with you 1,000%, Jessica, and I have just recently made podcasts about that, not about the March 14th. I just
Yeah.
recently learned about it, but about what you just said in the concept. We need to get out there. I said, and I believe this.
Yeah.
There's no legal mechanism right now to get rid of Donald Trump. He owns both houses of Congress. Obviously, he owns the White House. He owns the DOJ. He owns the FBI. He owns the judiciary. There's no legal way to get him out. He's going to thumb his nose at all the court orders. The only thing that's going to change anything is people taking to the streets. To the streets, because they're cowards. Again, if you get millions of Americans into the streets in DC, those cowards are going to pay attention.
Yeah, we talked a few minutes ago about every order being illegal. I mean, you were talking about the military not having to follow illegal orders. Literally every order, anything that comes out of this administration is de facto illegal because of the illegality of his presidency.
Fruits from the poisonous tree, we would say in law enforcement.
People have to be really brave right now. Federal workers swore an oath to the Constitution. They do not have to follow any illegal orders. I know it's hard. Listen, I know people have their all kinds of personal considerations, and believe me, I've been through this for years because I basically threw that all out the window to devote my life to this activism. But you got to realize where you are and realize this is the thing. We got to realize the power we have. Yes, purportedly, they have all the power, but they don't really have it. They only have it because we're not taking our stand. We're not claiming our power, which we have. So we really have to, yes, like you said, make an unmistakable show. People have to do it in their jobs, especially federal workers, especially the military. People have to do it on every single level, reclaiming the power that is ours and refusing to hand it over to them. And in the meantime, completely changing the narrative about what's acceptable right now. No, it's not acceptable to live through this. The only acceptable thing is to get him out of our White House.
Jessica, I don't think it's possible to overemphasize how dangerous it is right now. I know the average American, whether they, are trying to pay attention or not, because as has been said, it's just a fire hose of activity coming out of the White House. We are now, not tomorrow or soon, we are in an oligarchy. We've got these billionaire tech bros under Musk, unelected people that are into all of the systems, all of the databases of the United States.
Mass theft and invasion of privacy. Yes.
I mean, and it's getting worse. Again, we're pressed for time. I want to go over a couple of other things here. I don't know how aware you are of this, the fact that Trump issued one of his many executive orders. He ordered Homeland Security and the Pentagon to get back to him in 90 days about the feasibility of enacting the Insurrection Act and the Alien Sedition Act. He's always talked about that, but now he put out an order that they need to get back to him in 3 months. That was over a month ago. And of course they're going to agree, they're bootlickers, they're members of the cult. If he enacts both of those together, it's all over, because that is the military, the active duty military reserve National Guard taking to the streets with orders from Trump and the DOJ to basically do whatever they want. When I say
to
do
turn
whatever they want,
against the people.
Yeah, I mean, they literally will have orders. You know this, that if they think somebody is a really bad person, shoot to kill. They don't need a warrant. They don't need probable cause. Under martial law, they're gods. And that's what we're looking at in less than 2 months if this happens.
It's unthinkable. And by the way, you talk about that fire hose. I miss that. And that's
There's
what
too
they
much.
want.
There's too much.
That's what they want. That's what they want, is to not to so overwhelm you that you think that there's nothing that you can
This
do.
is one of the most disastrous things that people have not been not paying attention, that they've missed.
Wow.
This
Well,
will be
thank you for putting it on my radar because now I will share it on Lights On too. My God Almighty. Yeah, I mean, listen, we knew this was coming. That
yes.
but you're telling us it's in black and white.
Oh, he did it. I mean, he did it right, I think, the first
Yeah.
week, and it went under the
Yeah.
radar, and he gave them 90 days, and that was what, 40 some days ago.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
going to happen. It's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Well, that
Um,
I mean, listen, when you say that just escalates the dire need
yes.
for the members of the military to understand that what their oath is to the
Let
Constitution.
me ask you this, because we've just got a few minutes left.
Yeah.
And this is really important to me.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about MAGA, of course. I mean, the people in MAGA that are running the government, the wing nuts, the Cash Patels and the Hegseths and all that. Jessica, what is your opinion? And I've talked a lot about this, about the voters, about the MAGA voters, about the people who still support Trump, and no matter what he says or does, even today, even some of them that have lost their jobs and have their wives deported. What do you think about the MAGA voter, the Trump voters today? What's going on there?
Few different things are going on. It is a spectrum. It is a spectrum. So on one spectrum, you have the complete people that are off the deep end that you've seen in Jordan Klepper's videos for The Daily Show show up at rallies. Okay, so there's that end, which, listen, it is what it is. And then there is. It's hard to believe this. It's hard to believe that there are still people like me who care about freedom and human rights who could still be following this. But your viewers need to understand just what a disease Fox News and now it's likewise, outlets in the media has perpetuated on the American people. They they wrap this all in the American flag, okay? They wrap it in the American flag and the Bible. They are going out there making their viewers believe that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing these things with the best of intentions for them. And then they intersperse it with stories about dog rescue and other happy little things. People need to understand like what a it's a machine that Fox News has their viewers trapped in. And it's a feel-good machine, it's a community, and that's what MAGA has been to a lot of people for a long time. It's been a community. And really the broader picture here is it's a cult, but a cult, more simplified, is a community of some sort, right? It makes people feel like they have a place to belong. And as we all know, they are in nonstop mode of vilifying the others. So they have established a common enemy and they've made everybody afraid of that enemy. So it's brainwashing, it's hypnotism, it's mental malpractice, and for people that are exposed to this media ecosystem, it's 24/7 for them. It's constant brainwashing. And so it can get, and like I said, it's hard for me to believe that people like me could still be in that vortex because there have been so many opportunities to get out at this point. But it really makes you see an inverted reality. Up is down,
Well,
up is down.
I bring that up now because even if God, I hope this is
Yeah.
successful, meaning all of these mass protests, which are going
Yeah.
to happen, even if we do implement change and things start to get back to, well, I don't know about normal, but they change for the better, we're going to be stuck with tens of millions of hardcore cult members. And that scares me. And I've written about this and I'll continue to speak about it. That's a real problem. And I don't know what we do about that. In fact, I believe there's no quick fix to that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you that it has to happen on a really granular level. Like we have to do this in our families and our personal experience. First of all, one thing I have never done in my however many years that I've been on the other side is I don't vilify the people. Like ultimately, yes, they espouse terrible views, often hateful, xenophobic, racist views. I don't endorse any of that. But at the end of the day, they are victims of the propaganda. And it's like a cycle of abuse. They're stuck in a cycle of abuse. And so I think we have to be really ready to welcome them because, like me, they're going to find out the hard way that being in MAGA doesn't protect you from the most vile, rights violating, anti-freedom attacks of Donald Trump, you're going to learn the hard way. This is going to come to your home, to your household, to your family when you find that something that is dear to you runs into conflict with something that he wants or his ambitions. So they will learn the hard way that he doesn't care about them. And I think like I often say on Lights On, when those people wake up, and it will happen, they're going to be some of our fiercest allies, just like I am.
I hope you're right. And that's why you're you and you're much nicer than me because I don't cut them any slack. I've had it. I really have. I mean, they're vicious people. I don't
Yeah.
know if any of them are going to ever come
You
around.
know what though? I don't give it a lot of oxygen either. Like I just don't I don't even I spent a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time in personal conversations over the past 8 years. You know, we've all had them where we're like, "Oh my God, I'm arguing with, like, they've got their Fox News talking points on the ready, and I just you can't, and you're
Oh,
just
no.
for your own
No, no.
mental health,
I
you
gave
have
up
to,
years ago. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
for
waste
your
any
own mental
oxygen
health,
either.
you walk away. But
We've only
there,
got a few minutes left
yeah.
because I know you have to go. Something I wanted to get to, one of the most important points that you've made is the fact that you have some credible evidence and you do believe that Donald Trump lost this election too. Do you want to talk about that? You had
Yeah, David.
Greg Palast on. He's a filmmaker, journalist, data scientist. I know if you could talk about it in the next 5 minutes or so
Yeah.
that you've got, or 10 minutes, you
Listen.
take the time you want. That's a critical point. Would you let my viewers know what
Mhm.
you found out about the fact, and like you say, this is not tinfoil stuff,
No.
that you believe that Donald Trump lost the 2024 election as well?
It's really unthinkable, David, to think that we're living through all of this with a man who very likely did not even win this election. It is unthinkable. This is Russia. This is Russia. Okay. So listen, I left my former network, Midas Touch, to have these conversations because they, with a lot of people in the Democratic mainstream, were terrified of considering the fact that this election might have been manipulated. They were terrified of touching that conversation with a 10-foot pole for fear of being called election deniers or being compared to MAGA in 2020. Now, if you think about what MAGA did in 2020 with that whole spectacle with Rudy Giuliani and the dripping hair dye and just the Jenna Ellis and every insane
The
thing that
Kraken. Yeah.
happened,
Yeah.
Kraken, leading up to a deadly insurrection at our Capitol. And if you think that that might have just been a warm-up act for really being able to steal an election and so, you know, terrifying the other side of being compared to you that they won't even do their due diligence. My God, what a job has just been done on us,
Well, I've
David.
always believed that, and I was in the minority. You may have believed that as well, but now you've got some proof. As
Yeah, and
this,
I mean, I'm more than happy to. I started off talking with election security experts. These are not, as you said, tinfoil hat people. These are people who have worked with the top computer scientists in this country who are cited in Kamala Harris's book herself. The Truths We Hold talks about how easy it is to hack elections. And these people were putting out, you know, five-alarm warnings saying, please, please, Kamala Harris, ask for recounts of paper ballots. We know that the very election deniers that you don't want to be compared to had access to the software in 2020, 2021, and it was never mitigated. Their access was never mitigated. I mean, this is actual fact, David, that passwords to Dominion voting machines were printed on t-shirts, like hard-coded passwords. These things were never looked into.
those
And then you
cowardly
have
Democrats again. I'm sorry, that was their
Yes,
again.
yes. It's unbelievable. So I started, I left Midas Tech because I'm like, I don't have any time to waste. Kamala Harris only has so much time to request recounts. I need to sound these alarms. And I did it as much as I possibly could with my platform. We all know she never requested a single hand recount in a single battleground state. Absolutely tragic. And then after, and by the way, Greg Palast is the one who has looked into voter suppression.
Would you please give him some
He's
shout out here
incredible.
for
Yeah, he's
people that may
incredible.
want to
And
look him up?
Listen, yeah, you can go to the Lights On website and or Lights On YouTube and see my interview with Greg Palast.
Mhm.
He has uncovered and verified that 3.5 million people, likely Democratic voters, mostly voters of color, were purged from the rolls
And he's got the
in
data.
20.
I've seen the
He's
interview.
got the data. He's gone back and made sure, no, these aren't dead people. These are real living people who wanted to vote in 2024 and were denied that right. 3.4 million. That would more than make up for the margin of error that Donald Trump won with. So you've got two fronts. You've got the massive voter suppression front, which, by the way, was also birthed out of the 2020 Stop the Steal. It was something called True the Vote, where they basically were empowering these networks of whoever around the country, MAGA people, to submit lists of people to have purged from the rolls. And these states were taking these lists and following their orders and purging people to the tunes of millions of voters, mostly voters of color. So there's that one front, voter suppression. And then you got the other front, and that's the very likely manipulation of the election results. And what has came to me in the later months after I was doing the initial reporting on recounts was data scientists and data analysts who have taken the raw data produced by the counties. I mean, they're not making this up. Anybody could do this. If you have the ability to analyze data, you could do this yourself. Pulling data from places like Clark County and showing the distribution of the votes coming out of the tabulators. Now, a normal data distribution, it's going to be all over the place, right? There's not going to be any specific pattern. But what they found in early voting in places like Clark County is that after a certain point of the data coming out of the tabulators, it starts skewing all to Trump and away from Kamala Harris. And it is, from a data perspective, completely mirroring what has been dubbed a Russian tail, which was a term that Russian data analysts came up with in 2020 after their constitutional referendum, which we know, of course, the elections in Russia are shams. And it's instead of a regular bell curve, you see this point where there is clear manipulation and the pattern skews off in a long line, and it's called been dubbed a Russian tail. So the same
And,
pattern appears in Clark County.
and the country, the Democrats, the governments of the states, the feds,
Yeah,
we did nothing about that because what?
because we're feckless, because I mean, because they totally abandoned their post. I mean, yes, this was the responsibility of Merrick Garland, along with, bringing charges immediately after January 6th in 2021.
Oh,
Completely dropped the
don't
ball.
get me started on Merrick
Yeah,
Garland. That's another
no,
podcast. It's another
yeah,
two podcasts. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
exactly.
And,
Completely dropped the ball.
and
This is their space, and instead of having our federal law enforcement carry this burden, which they should have, we have independent people like the Election Truth Alliance that I've had on my show and others like Smart Elections doing the work that our federal law enforcement should be doing.
and just in the last closing minutes, why I get it about the feds, that Merrick Garland, that whole debacle. Why
Yeah.
didn't the states, some of the states at least, run by sane Democrats, supposedly, take it upon themselves to look into this with their law enforcement and election capabilities?
Yeah, why didn't they, David? I mean, I guess for the same reason. And by the way, some of these groups, ETA and Smart Elections, I think are trying to really pressure still those state entities like the AGs and the secretaries of state to use their levers of power to look into these things because they are still trying to get paper ballots. That's really the only way to cross-check this.
Because
And
in some of these counties, and I heard this in your podcast,
yeah,
the very election denier groups, the Stop the Steal groups,
yeah,
were in possession of the
yes,
voting machines for
yes,
forever, for months,
yes,
years.
yes. And this is
Uh,
well documented in court cases.
that's crazy. But all of this is crazy. All right. Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough time now, which of course means you've got to come back. It's your own fault. So, no, seriously, there's just too much here, and we don't have time. I mean, I'm not going to make light of it because I speak about this like you every day, and I'm extremely upset about it and passionate. We're losing our country. I don't
Yes.
know if we're going to get it back. I'll be honest. I don't know if we're going to get it back, but people like you and me are going to go down trying. I know that.
I always I turn the framing to this, and you think of how dire and serious and unthinkable and horrific what we're living through is. And then on the flip side, you think, oh, wait a minute. We're the people who get to change that. We're the people that get to determine the course of history and the salvation of the free world. That's a pretty amazing honor that is
It is.
bestowed on our shoulders. So if you take it like that, I mean, I'm a spiritually minded person. You mentioned Christianity with my introduction. I think I'm confronted with a challenge that seems unbearable and unthinkable, and I'm like, oh my God, why do I have to deal with this? I switch to thinking, oh, thank you, Father, for thinking me worthy of overcoming this.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'll
So,
leave that with this follow up from my thoughts on this.
yeah.
I'm also spiritual, but I have a military background, and I'm going to go back to what was said, but I think it was Tojo after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and they were all excited, the Japanese high command and everybody. Look what we did! We really got them. And he stood up and said, "Gentlemen, all you've done was awaken a sleeping bear and fill him with an awful rage." And that's what I'm thinking about Americans, that not all of them, but enough of us. And there are tens of millions of us, Jessica,
Yes.
as you
Yes,
know.
there are.
We are now filled with, well, he said, awful resolve. Actually, to quote exactly, we've been filled with an awful resolve, I
Yes.
feel.
Yes.
And we're not going to stop
No.
until something gives. And it's not going to be us. So I'll leave it on that note because I'm an
Yeah.
optimist, even in these times, and I think you are as well. So, last word.
Thank you so much for having me. Please go to nowmarch.org. Nowmarch.org. Make your plans to join us in Washington, D.C. We are going to change the course of history on March 14th. Please come and be with us.
I couldn't agree more. Jessica Denson, thank you so much for coming to the No Delusion Zone. Come back again, and in the meantime, please take care, stay safe, and as I
Thank
tell
you.
everyone, stay sane.
Thank you, my friend. You too. You too.